Hi, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Professor Randrup, and I will show you how to use multiple regression on a data set and how to interpret it. So the first thing we need to take a look at is the basic principles. So multiple regression, if you haven't come across it before, is about defining outcome and trying to figure out what variables have what type of impact on that outcome. So we normally talk about y's. So the y is the result, and the x are the factors that impacts the results. We call them dependent and independent variable. A practical example could be that we're looking at the sales of Coca-Cola, and we want to determine what impact the price, the temperature, the weekday, and the location impacts the sales. So that's a typical question that can be answered by use of multiple regression. In case you don't remember it, it has to do with the relationship between the effect and the causes. We normally talk about the y's and the x's. So the y is the dependent factor, so the outcome we're looking for. And then the x's are the things that impacts that outcome. And the multiple regression analysis can analyze the direct effect on, for instance, x1 on y, but also take into consideration the interactions between x1, x2, and x3 on how it impacts the y. Now, in order to make this practical, let's take a look at how you actually do it with a statistical software. In this case, my example will be used, which is Minitab. And here from this little screen, you can see that the regression analysis is going into the stats, regression, and fit regression model. So that's where in the software you run the analysis. There's a couple of settings you need to add to it. So in this case, you add the responses. So what are the x's and what are the y's? So in this case, the y's would be the sales. And then you have two x's, which is the month and the end of aisle display. In this case, we define them as categorical predictors, so that's why we put them into the categorical predictor area. If we have continuous predictors, that would be put into the continuous predictors. There's a number of different add-ons and things we can do in terms of running it and getting different types of data, but we're just going to use the standard setup in order to get the major results. Now, once you run the analysis, this is what the standard outcome is from a standard test that goes with the standard settings. And there are a couple of areas that you need to be looking for to extract the most important data. So let's first talk about the R-square value. So the R-square value actually tells us about how much of the variation in the y can be explained by the x's. So that was one of the key numbers to figure out how much the variables that we have can explain the effects of the results or the y that we have. The second thing we look at is the p-value in order to determine if the effect is significant or not of the different variables. In this case, the numbers on the p-value are under 0.05, which means they're significant. So all of these effects are significant. The next thing we look at are the coefficients. So this is the in this case, the impact, the monetary impact the different variables have. So here we can see that the end of aisle display, when it is there, it increases the sales by 7,257. And we can then see the impact on sales with a different month underneath. So you can see it starts very low, 663. And in the summer month, month 7 and 8, there's a 12,000 euro impact on the overall sales. Last but not least, depending on what we're using it for, we might also find it handy to have the actual regression equation we can use to predict different types of sales if we are working with predictions. There's one more thing that is typically very useful when we do multiple regression analysis, that is the factorial plots. Factorial plots are also found in most software, advanced statistical software. In this case, the factorial plots is found in Minitab under stats, regression, and factorial plots. So that's how you produce them. Factorial plots look like this. So it shows us the relationship of the individual variables up against the y. So in this case, it's the sales. And in this case, you can see that the factorial plot shows us that there is a positive relationship between month and the sales. And it also shows us there's a significant positive impact if there would be an end-of-aisle display. So this gives us a graphical illustration of the results. Now let's run an example. So let's say we are in a situation where we want to figure out if end-of-aisle display or month have a significant impact on sales. And we also want to figure out whether Unilever should change or adopt a strategy for investing in end-of-aisle and displays. So that's what we're looking for. Some of the assumptions that we need in order to answer the second question will be that there's a gross margin on, or gross profit on the detergent sales of 35%, and the cost of having an end-of-aisle display is 2,500. So how do we crack this one? Well, first of all, we have to produce a regression analysis, and then we can use that to make conclusions. So let's take a look at an example. So here you see the data that we need, and in this case, we're going to drag over the information we need. So we just basically mark out the data we need, and then we copy paste that into Minitab. So copy, and then in the Minitab software, we simply just paste it in to Minitab. So that's an easy way to get the data in. So the next step is to do the regression analysis. So in order to do that, we go to stats, regression, and fit regression model. We add responses. We use the categorical predictors. We run the analysis, and here you can see the exact data that we are looking for. Let me also show you how you run the factorial plot. So it's again stats, regression, and factorial plots. And you run the factorial plots. There we go. And there we have the factorial plots we can use for our interpretation. So the next step is then to interpret the results. So let's take a look again at the results we have for our run here. We can see that the summary, so the R square valued is 79%. So about 4/5 of the variation can be explained by the month and the display. Now, in order to discuss how good it is, and let's go back to some of the data that we have about the situation. We know that the gross profit of detergent is 35%. So in order to estimate profitability, we have to detract the cost from the profits, from the turnover in order to get the profits, and this is the ratio we're going to use. And we're also going to look at the cost of the end-of-aisle display. So that's some of the calculations we need in order to determine that. So first of all, we can say 4/5 of the variation can explain, which is pretty good, not super great, but pretty good enough. And we know that the break-even point for the end-of-aisle display is 7,143 euros in terms of sales. So you know that the cost of end-of-aisle display is 2,500. We know the profit margin is 35%, so we need sales of 7,143 in order to pay for an end of aisle display. Now we can then see that the end of aisle display, the add-on for that is 7,257, which means that there's not a lot of distance between the cost of an end of aisle display and the actual profitability of that. So when we look at end of aisle display, we can see that it only more or less breaks even. And that's why it is not especially an interesting thing to run, because we don't really earn a lot of profits on running end of aisle display. Now, the other thing we can look at is the month, and you can see the value, the add to the sales value. And of course, what stands out here are the summer month and the summer period. We have a significant increase on sales for the summer month. So, and because we have months 7 and 8 going to 12,000 euros higher per month, then these months are really good in terms of sales. So in this case, conclusion will be that June, August have the highest impact on sales. End of aisle display have some impact, but it doesn't offset the cost, which is why that we should probably focus on supporting summer sales. And we should avoid end of aisle display because we don't add profitability with using it. So that's one way to use a multiple regression analysis for the answer of this type of marketing analytical question. Factorial plots look like this. So if you look at this one, you can of course see the same thing as the text table output showed, that there's a significant impact in the summer period versus the rest of the year on sales. So there you have it. That's how you use multiple regression, and I very shortly explained. This is how you run it, and this is how you take the most interesting insights out of it. Thank you for listening, and hopefully this has been helpful in terms of giving you an introduction to multiple regression for marketing analytics.